Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Walt Bauer, and I am the Pre-Service Training Coordinator at the Human Development Institute at the University of Kentucky. Welcome to the Human Development Institute's first spring seminar in the HDI seminar series. My brief visual description is I am a white male wearing glasses with hazel eyes and a blue collared shirt with a gray and blue tie. My virtual background is a three-story brick building that has offices for the Human Development Institute on the University of Kentucky campus. We use Zoom for our virtual platform. Audio is provided through the virtual platform. Our speakers will provide an opportunity for questions today. We welcome questions from all of our participants. Please type your questions for our speakers in the Q&A box for a robust question and answer session. If you hover over the bottom of your Zoom screen on the Zoom toolbar is the Q&A option. Please use the chat box for technical questions. We have real-time captioning for the webinar in the closed captioning feature. Turn on the captioning by clicking on the closed caption button at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and then clicking Show Subtitle. Should you have questions about CEUs, you can contact me. My email address is walt.bauer@uky.edu. Again, my email address is walt.bauer@uky.edu. We will have a 5-minute break at the midpoint of the seminar. Please take a moment to complete our brief evaluation. You will receive an email that provides a link to access the session evaluation after the webinar. It is helpful as we plan for upcoming webinars. The title of this seminar is Disability and Physical Activity. It's a pleasure and a privilege to introduce our presenters today. Our presenters are John Drummond. John is a PhD candidate in the Department of Kinesiology and Health Promotion at the University of Kentucky and is a 2023 graduate of the Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental Disabilities, also known as the LEND program. Emma Ballinger is a PhD student in the Department of Kinesiology at the University of Kentucky and a current trainee in the 2025-2026 LEND program. Dr. Elise Kearns is an associate professor at Asbury University and a LEND faculty member. Dr. Kara Lee is an assistant professor in the Department of Physical Therapy at the University of Kentucky. Morgan Turner is a program education assistant at the Human Development Institute at the University of Kentucky and a 2022 graduate of the LEND program. Lindsay Catherine Mullis is the Inclusive Health and Wellness Director at the Human Development Institute and a PhD student at the University of Kentucky. I'm now going to turn it over to Lindsay and Morgan to get us started.
Thank you so much, Walt. We're excited to be here with you all today for the Disability and Physical Activity Seminar. Morgan and myself are going to be framing the foundation of disability and activity. And in addition to the wonderful description that Walt provided, I myself am a white woman with long, dark blonde hair in a braid today, wearing my bingo size shirt because Morgan and I have been traveling the state of Kentucky, training extension agents on the fun program of bingo size. In addition to the educational background that Walt provided, I'm also the proud parent advocate to 3 lovely young ladies, the oldest of which, Caroline, experiences Down syndrome and a vision disability. So I'm really also a really strong parent advocate as well.
And my name is Morgan Turner. I am also wearing a white bingo size shirt. I am a Special Olympics athlete, athlete ambassador, and health messenger, a program education assistant at the Human Development Institute. And I was born with abnormal legs, so I wear prosthetics on both legs, abnormal left hand, so I have 3 fingers on my left hand, and hydrocephalus, which affects how I process things.
Mm-hmm.
So disability lingo goes to camp. If you notice, there's 2 images, both doing the same thing, but you'll also notice that one of them says a different wording, I guess.
Yeah.
And but they're also just doing the same thing as the top picture. So you don't need to um, make a different name for something.
Yeah. Exactly. So my daughter, Caroline, does equine therapy. And so for her, we don't call it equine therapy. We call it that she's going and doing her horseback riding lesson. So, ultimately the difference between these images here is that the kids' summer camp is the same activities as camp special needs. And it's not that they love camp versus I love intervention. It's that we're still doing those same things. We don't need it to be named something different when it's therapeutic. It's still recreation. It's still sports. It's still physical activity. We just might need to find different ways to support folks with disabilities and being successful.
Mm-hmm. So, why Americans with Disabilities Act? It's important, or it's an assumption made by most people that the Americans with Disability Act only talks about the physical environment, but the law specifically says to ensure that each service program or activity is readily accessible to and usable by individuals with disabilities through inclusion. This includes physical activity and recreation program and services. So it's the law. This image is from one of the disability community efforts that helped create the ADA, and the sign has a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. that says, "Injustice everywhere is a threat to justice," or yeah, everywhere. And then the ADA says to accomplish health equity for individuals with disabilities through inclusion, which is meaningful engagement. The colored icons represent anyone who might experience barriers. Icons represent the 1 in 3 can participate fully in your exercise or wellness program. So if a program or exclusion, they just weren't invited. Segregation, the program was accessible, but they're still not included with their peers. So that brings us to integration. The program is accessible, they are in, but they're still kind of in their own little circle, doing their own thing and not interacting with their peers. So that brings us to inclusion, where individuals who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized are equally appreciated, welcomed, and valued. And then this need for inclusion and meaningful engagement really matters because 28.7% of people in the US have a disability, and 34.3% of people in Kentucky have a disability. But just having a disability does not mean that someone is unhealthy. To be healthy, we need to live full, active lives, have tools and information to make healthy choices, and access to health care, including physical activity and recreation that meets the needs of the whole person. A study from the Lakeshore Foundation in 2021 found that 81% of people with disabilities do not feel welcomed in fitness spaces. So, of the 1 in 3 Kentuckians with a disability, the most common type of cognitive or mobility. It is important to note that people can experience more than one disability.
Yeah, and the experience of disability also varies from location. So the map of Kentucky you can see on the screen here, the darker the blue, the higher rate of disability. And you can see notably here, more in the Appalachian area of the state, the more rural area, there's higher experiences of disability. So recognizing that it's more prominent in rural areas and thinking about the barriers to access that people might be experiencing in those locations of the state.
Mhm. This matters because people with disabilities experience poor health conditions according to the 2024 CDC disability and health data. Disabled people in Kentucky are almost 2 times more likely to have diabetes. Almost half of the people with disabilities have experienced depression. 24.6% of people with diabetes are smokers, compared to only 14% of Kentuckians without a disability. Almost half of the people with disabilities have high blood pressure, and over half are inactive and obese. And all these health disparities contribute to the $14 billion Kentucky spends on healthcare annually. These data demonstrate the high need for inclusion of people with disabilities in health promotion programming and services.
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. That's right. So it's also important to note here that these poor health outcomes experienced by people with disability, and particularly Kentuckians with disability, is not as a result because of that disability experience or diagnosis. It's definitely more of a consideration of the barriers that are being experienced to access to programs and services, like being physically active or recreation within our communities. And one of the main barriers there is physical. Is it physically accessible? And thinking about how someone can physically access those programs. Attitudinal is actually the #1 barrier that people with disabilities experience. Morgan mentioned that Lakeshore Foundation quote about how many folks with disabilities feel unwelcome in fitness spaces. So having that attitudinal barrier and feeling welcomed. And then the resources. So that can be the resources of having adaptive equipment, the time of cost, scheduling, all of those kind of resources, the caregiver support to be able to have access is a barrier. And then communication. Have they been invited, welcomed into that program? Have they been intentionally recruited, as well as making sure that they are able to access fully and communicate in the way that meet their needs? And then the information itself, especially as Morgan and I support health education and programs and services, is the information being provided in a way that people can understand and digest and access, especially when we're wanting to ensure their health and safety. And so much more. Policy barriers, environmental, social structures, all different ways that individuals can experience barriers, which then promote those unhealthy outcomes.
Transportation.
Yes, and that's right on this next slide, some considerations for where you would maybe need to provide support to help ensure that people with disabilities are accessing your programs and services. The first one here is communication methods. So recognizing that we mentioned the people in more rural areas of the state have higher rates of disability. We are currently in a more rural area of the state and having some technology and internet issues today. So understanding your communication methods might not be successful if they're all electronic, and giving other alternative options for ways to engage your participants. Schedule is really important, especially in supporting people with disabilities that need to be mindful of early morning sessions, being able to make sure that they're able to access, get up in the morning, and take any medications that they need. And then support network. When we're focusing on supporting individuals that have disabilities, that they also come with a support network that can support them with transportation or understanding and accessing materials, or having those unique considerations or accommodation needs. And including that in the work that you're doing is to include that support network. And Morgan mentioned transportation, that whenever we're supporting programs is, I'd say, the most common thing that comes up.
Agreed.
Yeah, as how can someone get to the program that we're offering, and is there accessible parking, or is there a bus route that's right there on the line? Those kinds of questions are things that we address on the front end. Other considerations, recognizing that folks with disabilities might require extra time. So making sure you build that into your programs or schedules. Let's say you're working on a water sports program that has accessible and adaptive considerations. It's going to take more time for folks to be able to get on and off the dock and into those into those water recreation vehicles and such. And so considering that. And then cost can be a barrier. We mentioned that. So being considerate of that when you're working in programming. Again, that physical space, making sure it's accessible, and having accessible bathrooms, and make sure that's not an afterthought. And then asking questions. So this is talking about you asking questions to make sure that you're meeting the individuals that you're serving with their needs, but also giving them an opportunity to ask you questions so that you're really on the same page there and everybody's understanding. And if we're asking questions, some of the most important asking is identifying the disability and support needs. The best way to know what is needed is to ask. And so asking about disability. The current best practice for that are the BRFIS, or the American Community Survey measure questions. We've learned in our work that it's great to ask those questions because they focus on functional experience of disability, but also asking a bonus broad disability question of just, do you have a disability? And so asking these questions benefits your program by providing data on community needs. It also informs me as a program planner to make sure that what I'm doing is accessible, it's inclusive, I'm identifying any individualized accommodations or supports that are needed, and I'm able to do that to make sure that everybody can access the program. Those 6 questions are covering the functional, again, experiences of disability. So we're asking questions about hearing, vision, cognition, mobility, independent living, and self-care. These are the best practice, but the disability community recognizes that they're not all encompassing, which is another reason to ask that additional, do you have a disability questions? So let's say, for example, someone has a chronic condition and they're not currently experiencing a flare-up. So they might not answer yes to one of those functional experiences of disability questions, but they know they have that diagnosis. So being able to ask those questions again just really helps broaden your understanding of the population that you're working with and gives you the information that you need to really promote a successfully inclusive program.
And then, yes, some people with disabilities may need accommodations or considerations for inclusion in physical activity. However, it is important to note that the physical activity guidelines for adults with chronic conditions or disabilities are the same as everyone else. So 150 minutes per week of moderate aerobic exercise and 2+ times per week of strength exercises. The guidance suggests if someone is unable to meet those, that they should avoid inactivity and do what they can based on what they're able to do, as well as asking for support from a healthcare provider or physical therapist.
Yeah. And this resource in this slide that I wanted to make sure to share with you all shows an updated version of a physical exertion scale. This has been really helpful for us as we've been implementing exercise and physical activity programming. You can see here it's universally designed. There's the way that individuals can identify how they're exercising, what their exertion scale is by the intensity level. There's numbers, there's words, right? There's images, colors, every way that somebody can understand how they feel like their body is moving. The numbers on the left-hand side, you'll notice, don't go from a scale of 1 to 10. We've seen some versions of that, but what we like about this one is that those numbers follow a general rule of multiplying by 10 to showcase someone's heart rate. So us sitting here comfortably in front of our computers, we're likely there in that lower green area between the 6 and the 7. In a comfortable beats per minute for rest. And then as it gets harder, it goes into the yellow or the red. Hopefully we're not going too hard in the paint, the person that looks like they're having a heat stroke. But having this ability for individuals to be able to see and understand what they're doing with their bodies has been really beneficial. My favorite time we used this was with some young adults on the autism spectrum that were relatively non-speaking. And so we printed a big poster of this scale and had printed pictures of the individuals. And so they could take the picture of their face and put it on the scale to where they felt like they were exerting their physical activity. And it was great when we had folks that were not used to being active, thinking that they were in the red and that they were dying. And then we could take their heart rate and show them that actually we're more in the fairly light, right, in the green area, and then talk about what was happening to their bodies. So Morgan and I felt this was a really helpful resource and tool to show you all in ways of thinking about broadening that accessibility for physical activity and programs. And this really comes from lived experience for us. For me, when I was in my master's program as a practicum student, I did that with a therapeutic Parks and Rec program locally. And I was super excited when on my first day, They did a game in the gym, and then we went to the fitness facility, and the instructor said, Lindsay, you go with the wheelchair users. And I did, and we did bicep curls for an entire hour. And I thought, well, I'm the student, I'm not going to say anything. Maybe that was just bicep day. And then the next time I went back, fun game in the gym, went back to go into the fitness facility, and I started doing bicep curls again. Morgan can attest, I don't sit still well or hold my tongue. So I was like, do you mind if I pop in here? And I started having those participants do shoulder presses. And we talked about how this is how, if you're getting this dish down from a shelf, this is the muscle that you're using. And for folks that had lower mobility movement, I was sitting on the floor with little 2-pound weights and counting if they were moving their feet or their knees. And we were hooting and hollering and tallying and really focusing on so much more of what they could accomplish. And when we left that day, it was the licensed therapeutic recreation professional that had been in her field for a while that said, thank you, Lindsay, for helping me think outside the box. And so I share that story with you all today because even in the short time that you might have for the seminar with us today, you're going to get more information about ways that you can make your programs and services accessible for people. And I encourage you really to take that box. Don't put anybody in it. If anything, use it to elevate them and give them the opportunity to be active in their communities. And with that, we will gladly stop sharing and turn it over to the next presenter, which is Elise.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elise Kearns, and I am a physical therapist. So to follow up with what Morgan and Lindsay were sharing, I will look at some of the guidelines and I'll reiterate some of what they said, but build on a little bit of what they said regarding physical activity guidelines and what might you do to improve your health and wellness, what those numbers might look like, and give you some ideas about how you might do that as well. So we'll talk about the why a little bit, and then we'll talk about the how. So my counterpart on this presentation is Dr. Kara Lee. And at the very end of today's seminar, toward the end, she will show you and give and talk more about specific resources. So let me share my screen. So I'm going to share resources that are available to you on the internet. So I wanted to pull from a couple different sites. The first one being the American College of Sports Medicine, which is really the body that recommends and kind of sets the guidelines for everyone. So I wanted to share this presentation that goes over the considerations and recommendations for prescribing exercise, not only prescribing it, but also designing programs. So this is based on a panel of expert consensus statements. Let me put this in slideshow. All right. And I forgot, let's see, continue to share. Yes. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. And I forgot to give my description. I'm a white woman who's got long blonde hair with blue eyes, and my background is just a room in my home. Okay. So of course, I'm just going to build a little bit on what Morgan and Lindsay had to say. So physical activity, sometimes we think of a difference between exercise and physical activity, and are those two things the exact same? And actually, no, they're not. So if we think of exercise, you think of doing something repetitive over and over, like riding a bike, walking, running. Those are exercise examples, but they can also be physical activity. Well, physical activity doesn't necessarily have to be in the exercise category. So we like to use the term physical activity because that can really be anything that is your body is moving. So that could include things like gardening. That can include working around your house, doing housework. Whoops, sorry, I went to the wrong one. So really it's any movement that's generated by skeletal muscles that requires energy above a resting level. So that's helpful to know because I think Morgan shared that really avoiding being inactive also moves you toward meeting those minutes. So just because you aren't doing on an exercise machine doesn't necessarily mean you're not being physically active. So we've got 3 different categories. We have sedentary, light, and moderate to vigorous. So for us to realize the health benefits of physical activity, and some of those being you're lowering your cardiovascular disease risk, being probably the number one thing we want to think about. We really want to work our way toward that purple category. We want to be moving toward that moderate to vigorous amount. Now, anything in the light is okay too, for sure, but you want to be moving as many minutes as you can into that moderate to vigorous activity. So what does that mean? So I'm really happy that Morgan and Lindsay shared the RPE scale, that scale where it had the pictures and the numbers on the side, for you to determine how hard you're working. And that is an excellent way, even better than heart rate, especially if you take or someone takes medications that might lower their heart rate. Heart rate no longer is a great way to look at how hard you're working. So that RPE scale would let you know, and usually that's in that, I think it was in that 11 plus range that you want to be shooting for, that 11 to 14 range. And that can really kind of make you feel like your body's getting warm, maybe you're starting to sweat, but you're still able to talk and you're still able to carry on a conversation. So those are some good parameters there. And there's some examples they give here are brisk walking, bicycling, or jogging, but really there are hundreds of ways to meet moderate to vigorous. Okay, so here's just some statistics. I'm gonna move on past those because we've talked about some of those, but they will be there for you for your review in the slides. So what are some of the consensus from some of the research evidence? A suitable dose, like Morgan and Lindsay said, is 150 minutes per week. But if you don't meet the 150 minutes, we're starting to see some research that people with disabilities, it might be actually even less than that, where you might obtain the health benefit. So doing as much as you can, shooting for that 150, but if you don't meet the 150, don't despair. We also need to tailor our approaches, and then they must account, our physical activity prescriptions and programs must account for and mitigate barriers to promote participation. All right. Okay. So what would be some of the physiological or some of the body responses to exercise? Sorry, is in my screen here, that make it more difficult to participate for someone with disability. So the somatic nervous system really is thinking about how much energy it takes for you to perform a physical activity, and that demand might be more on someone with a disability than it would be without. Also, our autonomic nervous system really is something that you don't think of, but it's controlling your heart rate, your blood pressure. And so people with disability might actually have lower outputs of those things. So it might make exercise feel a little bit harder than it actually is. And then cardiorespiratory reserve, we also have reduced reserve energy stores on people with disabilities. So that's why that RPE scale is so very important to use. How do you feel when you're doing exercise? Okay. All right. Were the physical activity guidelines designed for people with disabilities? Actually, no. The evidence is from studies of people without disabilities, but our current guidelines still advise people with disabilities to be as active as their abilities allow and to avoid inactivity, which is also what Morgan and Lindsay said. And we need to make it personalized more than ever for people with disabilities. Okay, so what are some practical recommendations? The focus is on moving more. It doesn't have to be some specific exercise program, but moving more throughout the day. And that can be within a wheelchair as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean being on feet to do movement. Take an individualized approach, account for someone's differences in their body systems, identify and remove barriers as best you can, and recognize and eliminate ableism as well. Okay, so here's just some pictures reiterating what I just said. All right, so some resources for adapting physical activity programs for people with disabilities. Here's some ways to do that. You want to look for Inclusive Fitness Specialist Certificate. So these would be people that actually have training in adapting physical activity programs. You also might look for an Autism Exercise Specialist Certificate. So these things exist. So making you aware to look for these things when you're identifying quality programming. And there's something called the 6 F words, which is a play on words. Use the 6 F words to guide physical activity recommendations for children and adolescents with disabilities. And those things should be function, family, fitness, fun, friends, and future. So when you're thinking about doing a program, it really needs to be fun and include friends for children and adolescents as best you can. I think those would be, and family. I would say those 3 things really would be the hallmark of adapting a physical activity program. Okay, I'm going to move on from this, and there's our references, and I'm going to share a different screen quickly in my last few minutes here. Bear with me here. There we go. Okay, can everyone see this screen?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I am going to try my best to get it back to the beginning. I'm sorry. Bear with me. Dr. Bauer, how much time do I have remaining?
You have a few more minutes. Take your time. Take
Okay.
your time.
My screen, I'm sorry. Okay, so this is taken from the Special Olympics, and it's how to get your Fit 5. And I really liked this because it also, not only does it include physical activity, but it also includes nutrition and hydration. So I thought that that was wonderful from the Special Olympics group. So let me see here. All right, so the goal of Fit 5, exercise 5 days a week, eat 5 total fruits and vegetables today, drink 5 water bottles per day. So I think this is a really nice guide because it's very easy to read, it's very quick to see, and it's not complicated for all users. In fact, I might use this with my students as well. Okay, so here are some types of exercise that you might think about, and I also want to, instead of calling it exercise, I could say physical activity here. We could think of endurance type exercises, how long you can go, strength, flexibility, and balance. So I'm not going to go through all this, but I wanted to give you, here's an endurance category. So I wanted to, this gives you actual ideas. And if you want to see more, there's an advanced fitness cards that you could click on down here. So this gives you actual ideas that you can do at home or in any space. This one's using upper extremity arms, doing punching. This arm activity will actually get your heart rate up pretty quickly if you do it long enough. Here's some marching activity, swinging your arms. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but this one is strength. So I will provide this for you, and this will be a part of our slides. I think I could put this in the chat, or Walt, will you put this?
They are in the link I sent out at the top of the hour.
Okay, so here we have examples, push-ups on the wall for strengthening exercises, some curl-ups, which could also be done in a seated position, so you can adapt. And I think some of these advanced exercises and the other fitness cards will also give you adaptations to these exercises. Here are some examples of flexibility motions. Here are some balance activities. Okay. The last thing that I want to show you is still on this screen. So please feel free to go through. This actually gives you a schedule where you might be able to track what you're doing in this document as well. Okay, last thing here. This says anaerobic programming for clients with disabilities. And anaerobic means, just for very briefly, it's a very short-term burst of activity, and you get your muscles get the energy to do these short-term burst activities without really needing a lot of oxygen in the cell. So these are short-term quick bouts of energy. If you've ever heard of like short-term intensity training or high-intensity interval training or HIIT training, this is kind of the version of that. So I wanted to give this to you as well, that you don't have to necessarily do something for 30 minutes at a time in order to get benefit. So simply doing something like sit to stand, up and down, 5 to 10 times and doing that with multiple bouts in a very short period of time is also a very good way to get your cardiovascular fitness in, those minutes in. Okay, so I thought I'd share that one with you. So this is more about the short term. What can I do in quick movements to get some exercise and physical activity minutes in? So these will all be provided for you in the slides. Do I have any questions? Or we're going to do questions at the very end, or can I stop and have questions now?
Stop and take some comments or questions for
I'd love to
Dr.
have questions.
Hi. Are you
Hi.
able to hear me?
I am.
Yes.
Hello. Hi.
Okay, great. So, my name is August Romeo. I'm from Stony Brook Glen currently as a trainee, and I was wondering if you recommended any like gyms that might have some programs for disabled folks. I know I've been looking for myself as an autistic person, some sort of gym to go to that might have accessibility. I found some help in like locally owned gyms. They're more inclusive in some ways. So
Sure.
I was just wondering if you knew of any.
So at the end of today, or near the end of today, Dr. Lee, Kara Lee, is going to provide in the state of Kentucky. She's going to provide in different cities. There's a map, there's an interactive map where you can click on the region that's near you, and they will have programming that's specifically tailored toward people with disabilities. As far as specific gyms in those areas, I don't know of a specific gym per se that is doing that. And actually, it's probably a really big need. And I believe you're probably correct that the more privately owned gyms will be probably far better at tailoring programming. However, I would say some of the larger gyms that offer personal training services, especially if you seek out someone that might have those certificates that I mentioned, might be someone that could help adapt for you. Uh, Kara, do you know anything offhand of specific gyms that do a good job with this?
I think in our research, we found that there's a YMCA in Somerset that particularly advocated for the fact that they do this. Jonathan probably knows a little bit more about some particulars. I'm actually typing in the chat right now. I think that this is a whole that people in particular communities may know of some things that we could potentially add to this interactive map to help build the resources that are out there. So, August, you're asking an excellent question that
Yes.
I wish I knew more of an answer for so that I could help refer people to places across the state from the role that I'm in.
And Jonathan has put some great things in the chat too that answer and get to some of your questions, August. That he is actually an autism exercise specialist certified, and he could probably provide you if you're wanting to contact him. He talked about the punching activity, and then looking for AES certified folks via ACSM are a resource.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, if you're willing, I will be glad to contact you and talk more.
Yeah. Feel free to follow up.
John certainly put a couple comments in there. Good point, Elise. In my research, I have kids that experience benefits from just 30 minutes a week of martial arts training.
Absolutely. So I think don't get hung up on the 150, although that's a goal. I don't think that if you, oh, I can't meet the 150, so therefore if I'm not going to do anything. So I think anything that you do is good.
John also commented in the chat, I am an autism exercise specialist, certified if anyone wants to chat about it. I've had many combos with David Geslack, the guy who created it.
Yeah, if there's anybody in here too that's in the Louisville area, there's a gym there called Real Fighters Gym. Lindsay, who's there, was both a competition fighter in her past and has a PhD. She's looking at doing some work with folks with Parkinson's, but she also does work with kids on fight-based training. And just as a little trivia fact too, before she retired from kickboxing, she actually had a fight. She lost by decision to Valentina Shevchenko, who's a long-running UFC champion now. So, but yeah, Lindsay's a very interesting person. And again, that's Real Fighters Gym in Louisville.
Hey, Kara has a comment. People in particular communities may know more about what is available in their communities. We want to be able to identify more spaces that are doing great work across the Commonwealth and create a larger map of the available adaptive sports and rec programs.
Chelsea, hi. You popped up on my screen. Do you have a question? No, you just did. Okay.
Sorry, I'm one of the interpreters. We were just switching.
Hi. Anyone
Any-
else with questions? Well, I'll put my email address here. I'll type it right now in the chat. I am always willing to talk. I love talking about physical activity and exercise. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I also have a lot of students that are willing to engage in programming. So please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kearns. John Drummond, would you like to take a few minutes take us up to the top of the hour with?
Let me, let's see, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can, John.
And let me put that dialogue there. And all right, let me hit share and see if it'll allow me to. Let's see. Oh, scroll down. I got a lot of stuff open right now. There it is. Boy, it's all the way at the bottom.
Yeah.
My goodness. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, let me put it into presentation format. Let's see. Okay, how's that?
We can see the first slide, John.
Okay, fantastic. All right. And just before we start here too, if anybody has any follow-up they want to do, please feel free. There's a lot of stuff I've stumbled into and onto, during the course of my time here at UK. I'm ABD right now, so it's going to be a race. I will either just barely make it to defend before the end of the semester, or I'll have to defend in August or September. So we'll see how that goes. But anyhow, you can all see the titles there. A lot of this was based on my doctoral research. And so I'm going to move fast. I'm going to hit some things more in depth than others, but I put it all on there. This is kind of a dissertation in about 16 slides, or at least the guts of it. And please feel free to ask questions, follow up, or whatever the case may be. And see, okay, there we go. So one thing that's really interesting here is that now exercise and movement is accepted as an evidence-based practice for autism. That's been around since about 2020. That's essentially where the argument ended. And you can see down there in the consolidation period where the work by Steinbrenner kind of, was the first to say, hey, this is an exercise and movement approach that is evidence-based. Martial arts, yoga, and mindfulness activities have essentially been hailed as being kind of maybe the most promising for the future. But anything that involves sequenced activity and open sequenced activity where you have to be thinking while moving appears to be maybe what the secret to this is. So that's why equine activities, for example, work, right? Because you're controlling yourself as you ride the horse, you're controlling the horse, you're having to think while you're moving, while you're decision making, and that for some reason seems to be very powerful in a whole bunch of ways that I'll talk about shortly here. And so there at the bottom, you can see that, there's a lot of things that are sitting out there on the horizon about where we go with this. And there's already in the peer-reviewed literature over the last couple of years beginning to be some really good stuff that is essentially addressing movement-based therapeutic approaches that can be, blended with all kinds of other therapeutic approaches. One of the things that's great about martial arts and other exercise compared to some of the medical opportunities that people may pursue for the health of themselves or their children is that it's much more affordable and it's much more available. And sometimes, for example, the folks in my study, I've got people that have paid as much as $25,000 a year out of pocket for support from the medical community, depending on what their medical insurance was. So in this effort, I stopped it. The research is actually continuing, and I've now added dance to this and some other things. But this tracked 21 youth with autism. You'll see some of the numbers jump up and down by participation. As many of you will know too, kids with disabilities often have other things going on, comorbidities. They sometimes get sick. They sometimes, are going fine for 2 months. They might miss 4 weeks and things like that. So you got a little bit of that going on. But essentially, for 211 days on average, some a little bit longer, some a little bit shorter, I tracked 21 kids in California, Texas, Kentucky, and 2 different sites in Virginia. You can see the breakout there for kind of the most persistent 19, 14 male, 5 female, 12 Caucasian, 4 Black Caucasian combination, 2 Latina or Latino, 1 of each. And essentially, you can see the age there to 5 to 17 years. In the results that I'm going to show you here, I'm not going to really talk about differences based upon just age or sex, and that's because things did not differ much by age or sex. The one thing that differed by sex was for some of the prepubescent subjects that were involved, some of the physical tests, girls who had been inactive, among those 5 girls that came in, once they started being active, improved so rapidly that they actually skewed the results enough to get a significant result, in terms of sex mattering. But again, it was just for some of the physiological things, especially squats, especially free squats. So you can see here, there's a lot of comorbidities too that have to be considered. I asked questions about, for example, medications that are being taken, because some medications obviously are weight gaining or weight inducing. And so there is control for those kinds of things, but I won't go deeply into those right now. So if you look here, you can see over the course of time how things improved along with the significance levels of those improvements. Basically, I've now hit a point in the study. I'm not going to track anything but balance anymore, because some of the other findings are so robust and so well supported in the rest of the literature. One of the things that is interesting is for those that gained mass and their BMI went up, they also overall improved in squats and push-ups. So what does that mean? It means essentially that it's likely that they gain some muscle mass. So not all weight gain is bad. I will also say that the kids in this study were at a BMI that was on the upper edge of kind of the acceptable envelope for kids of their ages. And again, there was a range of ages and it differs a bit throughout the age range, but they were much less obese or much less overweight than their peers when you look at youth with autism that are not active. And so it may well be that exercise is one of the things that really can be a part of extending life expectancy and everything for people with both autism and maybe more broadly neurodevelopmental disabilities. So, but you can see there that, the effects were pretty profound for improving in a number of physical performance aspects. What was also interesting is I had 9 out of the 19 subjects that I had really good data on. And the good data, again, implies those who stayed in the study, those who stayed involved. I've had a couple of kids drop out because of medical problems that arose during this. I had one that dropped out because their father went to jail. So there are some things that happen to people along the way in life. But I had 9 that were in 2 different programs, one here in Kentucky and one in Virginia, that use the Spectrum Skills system, which tries to break out the martial arts training and focus on the particular elements that you see to the left. So determination, one of the things that measures determination is board breaking, right? You have to overcome, the reticence to hit a board hard with your hands or kick it to break it. Another one is things like observing and then detailing. So in that case, for example, sometimes the teacher turns the tails and it's the kid who has to describe to the teacher what to do, or maybe the teacher does some things right or wrong and the kid has to detect what they did right and what they did wrong as part of internalizing their understanding. So for those kids that were in the Spectrum Skills approach, you can see all the different things here that they seem to do better at, in terms of significant differences and different skills that are associated with martial arts training. Now, we see here too, and the number is small there for the fine motor skills improving from start to end. Not everybody answered that. But there does appear, and this is something for future research, that practicing striking combinations actually may improve, strangely enough, fine motor skills more than gross motor skills. And so why exactly that is, I'd like to dig deeper into. Gross motor skills were associated, not surprisingly, with a measure of control during movement. Okay, so I don't think anybody would be much surprised by that. So the more control during movement that one gains through training, the better generally their gross motor skills get. You can see there were a number of things that were associated there with the mastery of self-defense techniques. I'm really big on self-defense techniques for a few reasons. 67% of youth with autism in a recent piece by Autism Speaks have experienced bullying. And depending on age, sex, location, all those kinds of things, people with disabilities suffer criminal insults from others and victimization at anywhere from 3 to 12 times the rate of the neurotypical population or the population without disabilities. So that's a real concern. Turns out that for self-defense techniques, striking and breaking matter more than anything else. That's board breaking and then striking techniques. And all of that overrides belt level, time that they've been training, length of time they train during the week, and everything else. So it's really kind of incredible that, those are the kinds of things that really seem to bolster self-defense techniques. One of the biases in the study, though, is that most of my instructors spend more time on the striking arts than things like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo or other forms of grappling. Psychologically, for the 11 that I had full data on, including grade reports from the end of their semester through their parents, mean GPA rose a little bit. That was significant. Not surprisingly, we took tests and assessed working memory as part of executive functioning, and working memory was associated positively with the change in GPA. You see in the third bullet there that those in the study working with a special ed specialist experienced less desirable change in GPA. That's probably more of an artifact. In other words, someone needing special education specialist help was probably deemed to be, it appears, more severe in their disabilities, and of course was simultaneously struggling in school a little bit more than somebody that was having less struggles with their disabilities. So that one's probably just artifactual. Injury rates were inversely associated with psychiatric care. I asked about all the healthcare professionals folks were seeing too. And that's really interesting because, psychiatric care was associated with less physical injury, but not necessarily with support from other medical professionals like medical doctors or behavioral pediatricians or, folks like that you would expect. So that's worth following up. Is there a little bit of psychosomatic dynamics here going on, at least for some kids who initially, when I talk to parents, initially their kids weren't all that enthused with doing any activity, let alone martial arts, right? So the parents had to kind of say, no, we're going to keep going back for a while. You're going to try this for 3 months before we make a decision. Not surprisingly, psychiatric support was associated with the prescribing of medications, and 13 of the kids in the study were on medications that are associated with weight gain or weight fluctuation. I had basically 40 different possible benefits of adaptive martial arts. This came from a lot of the stuff I started back in Lend and have done over the past several years, where I was just talking to people and trying to compile a list of, what difference does adaptive climbing, adaptive martial arts, adaptive dance make? And so I've built over time a list of different characteristics here. And so now in this study, I gave it to instructors and took their mean, and I gave it to parents and took their mean, and wanted to look at how they, how they match up with each other. And so you can see they're highly correlated, but they're also significantly different too. So on average, across all 40 different things that were included, instructors kind of had an agree position. That's the 6 there on a 7-point Likert scale, that, these things help. Parents were, having a much better global sampling of what kinds of things, happen to their children. We're likely to say, I slightly agree. So it's a positive thing, but it's not always as impressive as an instructor might think, with just the viewpoint based upon dealing with the kids in a very controlled environment. You do see here that what I listed is all of those that would round up to the agree, the 6-point on the Likert scale, or 7 being, strongly agree. And so you see there a number of things that are split between physical, behavioral, and affective or emotional attributes that seem to get better with martial arts practice, and the parents and the instructors really matched up well on those in agreement. Here's some pictures from some of my people. So this has been an absolute pleasure. I've gotten to know a lot of great people, across the 4 states and 5 locations. Also, thanks for a lot of the photographs that I have from one of them from Emma Siebold. She's a student at the University of Texas, but also works for Morgan's Wonderland. So I cut a contract with her as part of this study to do some photo work for me. And then there's also, I'll just mention it now while I'm talking about some of the things that were involving others. I had a professor at Arizona State University too, who let me use one of his measurement tools that you have to pay to use. And I'm not allowed to say what I paid for it, but I will say that he was interested enough in the research that he allowed me to use his instrument for less than 5% of what they normally charge. So that was a big win too. On the psychophysiological side, and moving into things where both things are involved, you can see here we looked at and measured physical self-efficacy and school activity self-efficacy, and you can kind of see how things sketched out in terms of the relations between things. Board breaking, again, is a confidence builder, and self-defense techniques tended to contribute heavily, as did, in a bi-directional way, social engagement. When we look at putting all of these things into an efficient regression model in terms of what influences or helps or works to improve physical activity self-efficacy. It's interestingly there too, I want you to look down at the bottom, just the physical activity per week that kids have at school was also associated with physical activity self-efficacy. And I raise that simply because one of the problems is right now is about half the schools in the United States have jettisoned their physical activity programs. That's a concern we should all think about. You see at the top there, the one bullet there that watching TV was negatively related to healthy eating. We also took measures on healthy eating behaviors. By the way, this is no different than what you see in the general population of kids. And so anyhow, some really interesting findings on physical activity self-efficacy. We also looked at, as I said, executive function. We didn't get a lot of strong findings for inhibition. We did get really good findings for working memory, and you can see some of the things that came out as being heavily associated with working memory here. Now, one of the ones that's a little bit confusing is the negative relationship between working memory and self-management. But the assessment on executive function had a lot more to do with psychological construct. The self-management list was kind of particular behaviors. And so what we suspect, or what I suspect may be happening, is that as working memory improves, one needs to call on self-management tools less because they're already inherently there, with better working memory, and vice versa when working memory is not so high. That's just a guess right now. That one is something I look at and say, we need to tear into that a lot more in future research and find out what's going on there. Obviously, better working memory is associated with better academic performance. And not surprisingly, many of you will say, oh, getting a good night's sleep or getting a little more sleep, probably helps with working memory as well. And there's some other evidence for that elsewhere in the research world. Continuing on the psychophysiological stuff, we see that, inhibition. I talked about, we didn't get a lot of strong findings for inhibition as part of executive function. But it's associated negatively with seeing a special education specialist. Again, this is probably an artifact. If somebody is seeing a special ed specialist versus not, they're probably having some problems with inhibition that somebody who doesn't stand out as needing to see the special education specialist in their school is probably having. So that may be an artifact of just things as they are in the real world, if you will. And then one of the things that is interesting, though, is that inhibition was associated with an interaction between self-defense techniques and responsible decision-making. So some of you may be sitting there going, what do those two things have to do with each other? Because you'll think, self-defense, that's just striking back or taking care of the person that's trying to hurt you or whatever, but it's actually much more than that. So all the instructors in the study teach self-defense in a way that goes everywhere from how do you verbally encounter? How do you verbally engage somebody else to escape the threatening situation? How do you do something immediately physically and then escape the situation? And so, what I'm getting at here is with self-defense techniques, there's a lot of decision-making that goes on there. And so if you look at it that way, it's maybe not so surprising that there's an interaction between self-defense techniques as somebody has learned them and in what settings to use them, and a measure of responsible decision-making. There's also a little bit of the case where older kids have a little bit more developed responsible decision-making skills. That's probably not a surprise to most of you. I also tested as a pilot to go with some other things that I used with fine and gross motor skills. I did one running of the development coordination disorder tool. And again, this will be, probably not surprising. But for those that were higher on the developmental coordination disorder scaling, and higher means, closer to being, neurotypical, not having pathology and those sorts of things. That was associated with better fine motor skills, being better at striking combinations, and better at self-defense techniques, which are also sequences of movements done together with some detail. This is just a cutout of some of the larger findings, but I did a structured interview with the parents too. And so I was asking them, when it comes to physical conditioning, affect or emotion, thinking or cognition, ethics, behavioral benefits, what do you see as the biggest benefits, for your children? And so you can see here the kinds of things that emerged. And so I'll just pause for a minute. Obviously, physical conditioning, strength coordination, and gross motor skill improvement was really big. For the affect stuff, emotional self-regulation improved. Becoming more sociable is one that all my instructors have talked about too, that they see as a really big benefit, that kids that have autism, when they go from training alone or not being in any kind of physical activity with other kids, that there's some sociability things that happen there that are very positive in terms of getting along with others, cooperating with others, managing conflict with others, giving feedback to others. One of my instructors really stands out. She asks the kids to sometimes talk about another kid and say, what did they do good or bad, right? And you can see some kids that have moved from just saying negative things about another kid to, like, here's some positives and here's some negatives. And then some of the folks that, are just coming into the class that are new, you see this thing where they just list the bad things. And so part of this is what we've all learned in life, whether we like to do it or not, in giving feedback to another person, we've all learned, the sandwich effect, right? Say something good, say something critical, say something good. And so you can see that on the behavioral benefits, there's some things that come along with that too, that may help with schoolwork and concentration and those kinds of things, as well as, again, getting along better with others. And then you can kind of see what the parents pulled out as the most important one. They were all over the place, but improved self-efficacy and confidence, stronger social skills, and the ability to begin forming better relationships. In some case, just forming relationships was something that they highlighted. I had 2 kids in the study that are going to be part in my dissertation of a dyadic case study. And so there were things that we caught in class that some of the folks like occupational therapists and physical therapists had not caught. One of the most remarkable was one of our young men having problem with foot flexion. But then when being introduced to building this relationship with another kid in class, they actually became competitors. And so, they wanted to outdo each other on push-ups and sit-ups and all these kinds of things. And so we've been working, and his parents have since, told some of the medical care practitioners and, the physical therapists, the OTs, that, hey, there's a foot flexion issue that we detected. And they said, oh my goodness, there is. And part of the reason they didn't detect it in the appointments with those professionals is they didn't push the child in the evaluations and in some of their activities physically hard enough for that to become evident or to be able to see it. Competition turns out to be something that neurodivergent children can enjoy too and do with good sportsmanship. And socialization, obviously, I've mentioned, is one of the things that really stands out as one of the benefits of being involved in athletic activities or training or sports activities with others. Now, what's really interesting is the blue line here is somebody that I've been watching for more than 3 years now. The red line, that kid, Tyler, I just started watching him since May. And so originally, when Max, when I watched him, he followed a very slow, very long, but classically shaped learning curve. In fact, he didn't learn his first form until after a year of training. And so when these two came in together for the first few months there, you see they kind of tracked, and that was the instructor getting to know them, and getting to know one in relationship to the other, taking some time for the social development to develop, to make sure they were getting along and interacting in the right ways, especially when doing drills. But then she had to work with Tyler a little bit more, and so you see the change in the number of sequenced movements that were in the training for a fairly long period of time, where she was able to take Max and allow him lots of training repetitions on the forms that he had already mastered. Okay, and you can see that over on the right there, kind of the mastery patterns there. And so it helped Max also become much better with attention to detail, less gross or minor errors in the forms execution and those kinds of things, even getting to the point of doing them absolutely perfect with some regularity. And so I could talk more about that, but I know time is limited. So I will stop here. That was kind of the guts of a dissertation, probably about 75% of a dissertation in 15 to 20 minutes. If you look at this later and you have questions or want, or even insights, please let me know about it. But I'll stop now in case there's any questions before we hit our break period here.
John, we have a comment, or we have a question in the chat, and the question is there a local martial arts studio that holds these classes?
So the answer to that is yes. So one of my Kentucky participant actually, her name is Rebecca, wonderful human being, and she's also been a classroom teacher in a number of different subjects as well. So she has that educator background too, but she's down in Wilmore. And she and her husband actually teach out of the community center down in Wilmore. So it's just a short drive outside of the Lexington area. In fact, both the kids that have been, well, three now, all three kids that she has that I've been watching for a while I think they all live in Lexington actually. So that's a local resource. She's very straight up though. She'll take a child in if somebody out there has a child or somebody that wants to participate. She's taken a few in, watched them, and engaged with them for about 4 weeks. And she's very good about, I think, assessing and saying whether her skills are a match to that child or not. So she's brought on 3. There's a couple where she said, come back after the child's a little bit older, a little more mature, maybe has a little more work with certain kinds of therapists or therapeutic activities. And she will be very straightforward, whether parents like that or not. I think it's an important thing to do for any care provider.
Nicole says thank you in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
We have a comment in the chat, and the comment is, I met a gentleman yesterday who teaches karate, tai chi, and he's going to start working with Gadar and kids like him. I can share his information.
Yes, please. I would very much appreciate that because I think there are aspects of this that I intend to continue far beyond, completion of the dissertation. Yeah, some of the parents are open to the idea. I say some, right? Because parents get tired of filling things out after a while. But some of the parents are open to the idea of keeping some of the kids in the study and continuing it for several years to see how it changes as you go through from being young through puberty, into the later teenage years, and how all these pieces fit together and what works and does not work.
Any other comments or questions for John? In the chat, Davita says, great, he does individuals in small classes. Kara says, any information you all share, we will add to a Google Doc we have running on the resources that may be helpful. How do we get in touch with you?
With me, I earlier put my email address there.
If you want to drop it in the chat,
I'll enter it again.
Oh, we just had a participant put your email in the chat.
Oh, okay, there it is.
There it is.
Okay.
Thank you, John, for sharing your research.
Thank you.
Let's take a brief 5-minute break. So let's come back. Let's pause and come back at 14 minutes after the top of the hour.
See, Walt, I've
Welcome back, everybody. Our next presenter is Emma Ballinger, and I'm going to turn it over to Emma.
Thanks. I am a white woman with brown hair and brown eyes, and I'm wearing a bluish green shirt today. I'm going to talk about physical activity and Down syndrome. Specifically, I'll go over the benefits of physical activity for this population, as well as factors that help to promote exercise and physical activity, and then how those things can practically be applied into program development. So hopefully, at this point, you're not asking this question anymore, but I do want to talk about why this matters. And so we've already mentioned before earlier today that the physical activity recommendations and guidelines are kind of just a blanket statement for all people, 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity for adults specifically. But if you think about Down syndrome, maybe you know that there are various health disparities. They often have different physiological processes or musculoskeletal structures that are slightly different. So, can we say that benefits are obtained to a similar degree for this population? So my research team and I conducted a systematic literature review looking at the health outcomes of physical activity interventions for adults with Down syndrome. We included 35 articles that had some type of physical activity intervention with both a pre and a post assessment of various health outcome measures. We included 35 articles that had various exercise modalities. So they included aerobic exercises, strength training programs, combined aerobic and strength training programs, as well as aquatic, sport and gaming programs, and then even some that also included some type of health education component. So the results from these studies showed essentially what you would expect. Under aerobic training interventions, adults with Down syndrome improved cardiorespiratory fitness. It took them longer to feel exhausted during exercise. They improved lower body strength and power and improved their walking performance. So they were able to walk for longer distances, longer durations, and have more efficient gait cycles. Additionally, under the strength training interventions, they improved their muscular endurance, strength, as well as their functional mobility and cognitive functioning. And then when you combine both aerobic and strength training into one exercise intervention, you get combined benefits. So all the things that you see in the aerobic and strength training individually, when you combine those interventions, you get a compounded result. And then for the aquatic training, they saw improved cardiovascular and cardiorespiratory fitness, as well as improved muscular strength, functional mobility, and swimming distance. Under the sport and gaming interventions, they also improved their muscular endurance, functional mobility. They saw improvements in balance, as well as development of sport-specific skills. And then from the health education components, there was improved self-efficacy, outcome expectations, and lowered perceived barriers to engaging in activity. And so what does all this actually mean? If you think about the things that it takes to engage in activities of daily living, like walking around the grocery store, doing work that requires lifting heavy loads, they were able to improve these types of metrics. So it enhances their ability to engage in things independently, as well as also developing those sport-specific skills that can help enhance enjoyment and achievement in those activities, which then will perpetuate wanting to actually perform those later on. All right, so what factors actually can be useful to promote physical activity? So I also conducted a qualitative study that focused on the parent and guardian perspectives of children with Down syndrome, as well as healthcare professionals who served individuals with Down syndrome. The interviews were semi-structured and lasting about 45 to 60 minutes, and I used a grounded theory analysis approach. Essentially, what this means is that there wasn't any like theory or anything that I was trying to prove. There were no preconceived notions that I was trying to match the data to, but instead the conversations were led by the participants themselves, and it was data-driven results. And what we found was that as these individuals shared their perspectives, there were various levels that were affecting behavior, and it actually matched the ecological model of health behavior. And what this model shows is that there's 5 different levels that can all influence behavior either independently or in an interactive way. And so with the intrapersonal level, we're talking about factors within the person, specifically in this scenario within the person with Down syndrome. And then also at the interpersonal level, these are going to be kind of like those social networks, peer-to-peer interactions, could be family member interactions, that kind of thing. And then the community refers to both like the infrastructure. So if you think about like urban versus rural communities, or the larger social networks within the community, those can be factors that fall within that level. The organizational level is going to be the larger institutions that are enforcing rules and regulations that affect behavior. And then policy level is going to be those rules and regulations, as well as the larger governing bodies that actually develop those. And all of these levels can influence behavior. So particularly pertaining to the results of those qualitative interviews, at the intrapersonal level, both parents, guardians, and healthcare professionals believe that perceived rewards were really essential for motivating for physical activity. So having different things that were enjoyable, promoted independence and a sense of accomplishment within the individual with Down syndrome were going to be motivators to physical activity. Within the interpersonal level, they discussed different groups. So they talked about the family, they talked about professionals, as well as just an overall sense of social interaction. And so having a family that is often encouraging physical activity is going to motivate the individual, as well as having professionals who are persistent, patient, knowledgeable about disability as well as activity. And they're also caring and engaging. Those are going to be the types of professionals that are able to motivate and help to promote activity. And then again, just having social interaction, having a buddy to go to the gym with, having someone in your neighborhood that's willing to, throw a football around or whatever, having someone around that's able to help interact and promote activity. Within the community, they discuss having safe environments. And so this can be like having a YMCA and physical structural environments, as well as thinking about, again, the infrastructure of the community. Are there parks? Are there sidewalks? Safe neighborhoods where we can engage in activity. And then at the organizational level, they talked a lot about programs and program structures. And so having programs that are individualized, routine, and fun were often promoters of physical activity. And then lastly, at the education or at the policy level, they discussed having educational policies, both for the guardians, professionals, as well as the individuals with Down syndrome themselves. And so talking or educating guardians about what physical activity is, how much their child actually needs, and ways to attain those levels. And then for the professionals, having not only training within their discipline, but disability specific training that could help to promote activity within the individuals. And then educating individuals with Down syndrome themselves about what physical activity is, how to build routine physical activity within their own lives, and finding activities that they actually enjoy. So now I'm going to discuss how we can practically apply those into program development to help promote activity. So we actually took the research from the qualitative interviews and developed programs at my prior university. So we used the ecological model when developing these programs. We had both a soccer program and a dance program. And you can see in parentheses the various levels that we tried to target through different aspects of our programs. And so we had a 12-week program. So again, we had one that was routine. We provided a safe environment, and we had the ability to individualize our program to our participants. We also ensured that it was an inclusive program, and so we had people with Down syndrome of all ages, as well as undergraduate students. And we did have a buddy system, but it's important for me to highlight here that it wasn't structured in a way that our participants felt like they had a babysitter or they had to have this one-on-one interaction. If they wanted to be independent, they could go be independent. But we had it set up so that the undergraduates were participants as to the same extent that our individuals with Down syndrome were participants. And so everyone was engaging in all the activities, all of the drills to the same extent. But by having a friend and a partner with you, it could be more individualized. So if I notice that my buddy is actually really good at dribbling, maybe I'll play a little bit harder defense on them, or they've really developed their skills in passing. I'm going to kind of run farther away from them to make them have a little bit more of a challenge. Or if I can see that they're struggling with something, then we can kind of hone in on those skills. So it was very much an individualized approach. structurally, we really wanted to focus on increasing achievement, enjoyment, and competence within our participants. And so we did make it routine. Again, it was a 12-week long program. But we had kind of a similar structure to each session. And so we would always start with dynamic warm-ups. And during this time, we would teach them different exercises that they could then apply to their own life. So things like jumping jacks, lunges, just going for a few laps around the track. And then we also built in progressive skills specific drills. And so we really started with those fundamental skills. We wanted them to feel like when they walked away that they were a better dancer, or they were a better soccer player. And so we would start out with, for the dances, we kind of had different components of the dance that they learned each time before actually building it and putting it together into a full dance. And then same thing with the soccer program. We started with very fundamental drills. How do you pass the ball? How do you shoot the ball? And then very simple dribbling drills. And then each week we would add those together so that they kind of compounded and became more challenging. And they were able to put those skills together and really feel a sense of accomplishment to see like, hey, this is where I was and now this is where I'm at. And then at the end of the program of the 12 weeks, we had a full scrimmage. We had the Mississippi State soccer team come out and do kind of like a big tournament. And then they also, at the end of the dance program, completed the full dance all together as a group. So there was like kind of a big achievement slash reward type thing at the end. The ecological model is not the only model that we followed. We also used aspects of the self-determination theory. Essentially, what this theory states is that there are basic psychological needs, and as you meet those needs, your motivation increases to continue to engage in whatever behavior you're engaging in. And so the three components are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And for autonomy, we wanted to provide choices at any opportunity that we had. We wanted them to feel like, hey, this is your choice to be here, and this is your program and your opportunity to learn a new skill. So, what is it that you want to do? What team do you want to be on? What color do you guys want to wear? What's your team name? Who do you want to partner with today? Are there any drills that we've done before that you want us to do again today? So again, just providing those choices and allowing for a level of independence throughout the program. For competence, again, we had those progressive skill building drills throughout the program. And so they were able to see their own levels of success as well as that of their peers. And the long-term program allowed them to develop those skills over time. And so that the motor learning could occur more regularly. And then lastly, relatedness. Again, we had that peer-to-peer interaction and used a buddy system. And so it really was a community, a team, a group of friends that came together every week to participate in activities. So in conclusion, physical activity is highly beneficial for all people of all ability levels. And facilitators exist both within and outside of the person. And so understanding what factors can actually be useful for promoting activity can be used to actually increase that activity level. If you feel like you're not in a position to meet those policy level needs, that's okay. What are the things that the person around you enjoys doing, and how can you use that to help to increase their activity levels? And then I also want to mention that this presentation focused specifically on Down syndrome because that's just where my previous research experience is. But the frameworks that we use, the ecological model and the self-determination theory, are generalizable frameworks that can be applied to essentially anyone in any population group. And so if you're looking to promote activity, consider those models as well as others. And really just ask the person what it is that they enjoy, and you can help to promote activity that way. And any questions?
Questions or comments for Emma? And we have two comments in the chat. Good stuff, Emma, is the first one. The second one is thank you.
Well, I would love to comment. I just want to say thank you to a young person stepping in and taking this really important work and driving it forward, because you're the future of these movements with all the questions and the in all the communities that all of our participants are from. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you, Emma, for sharing your research and program structure ideas. We appreciate it. Great job, Emma, says Bev in the chat. Let's move to Dr. Kara Lee. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lee.
I always have to ask, can you guys see my screen? Says disability and physical
Yes,
activity.
yes, we
Awesome.
can.
The perennial question in Zoom meetings. So thank you guys for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe how the rubber meets the road kind of in communities. So I want to give you a little background about me to just think of what is one person's journey to like being a part of all of this movement, right? To try to get more movement to all people. When I was 18 and a freshman here at UK, they needed volunteers at something at the activity center here. So I went. It was a wheelchair basketball tournament. And this was 1991, spring 92. Someone walked in pushing a wheelchair, and I thought, what's going on? And he sat down and took off both his legs. And I thought, ooh, he's a veteran, probably lost both legs. And so I became part of the wheelchair basketball community immediately. I was hooked. I participated in lots of different activities in my undergrad years. And that summer worked at a camp for people with special needs in Northern Kentucky called Camp Kysock. It was run by Easter Seals. Little did I know at the age of 18 how this was going to wrap around. So I'll kind of wrap this as we go through, but I just wanted you to have that background of me. And then to know I eventually figured out what I wanted to do in life, and it was become a physical therapist. I worked in pediatrics for 3 years, then moved to the inpatient spinal cord unit at Cardinal Hill here in town, where I worked with people with acute spinal cord injuries. And I've continued to work in the neuro realm ever since. It's been almost 30 years, and I now work mainly with adults. Parkinson's, spinal cord injury are some of my very favorite populations. But why did they ask me to be a part of this? Probably because as a PT, I help figure out how people can move, right? If it's not easy for them. So we've been through a lot of these questions in this slide, which are who, what, where, when, why, and how. And I'm actually going to take a break because I'm terrible about talking about what I look like, but I am a white woman, middle-aged, so I have all colors of hair on my head, mostly blonde and brown, and I've got blue eyes. But we've answered some of these questions already about moving and why we need to move for our health, for our well-being, for our social interaction, for our longevity. But why then are there adapted sports and recreation? And why did I use 2 icons here, a brain and a wheelchair user here? There's no icon that can really capture what adapted sports and recreation encapsulates, but I chose these 2 to help kind of divide the 2 basic ways that we have opportunities in a lot of communities. Elise talked with us about the need for movement. So did Lindsay and Morgan, Jonathan, and Emma both brought things to that. But again, mood, brain function, social interaction, self-confidence, and self-awareness are big parts of this. So we've got to try to make the right fit for someone about activities, as well as seeing what's available in our communities. But I have these 2 pieces up here because a lot of times opportunities are available for people with intellectual disability and or people with mobility issues. And someone is that my hand up?
It is your hand, Dr.
I have no
Lee.
idea why my hand is up, but I'm just going to keep going. Unless you can put it down for me, Walt.
I can.
All right, there you go. So when are adapted sports and recreation right for people? And for whom are they available? And I love that my career has spanned the lifespan, working with new infants all the way to people toward end of life. So I think as long as people want to be moving and doing things, that is when they need to be able to do that. People may be born with a condition, an illness, whatever that requires them to be able to move differently. People may acquire that. A lot of my teenagers on the spinal cord unit were 16 or 17 when they had an injury. I worked a lot with people who were diagnosed with Parkinson's, some in their 40s, some in their 60s, some in their 70s, but maybe they still wanted to play tennis or do the things they had done. So we just had to change the rules of the game a little bit. My premise all along my career as a PT has been, if there's something you want to do, there's a way to adapt it. I probably started to learn that as an 18-year-old working at a camp with people with special needs, having zero background in how to do any of this. It was just a little bit of common sense and being willing to go out on a ledge. So when do we need to do this? We want to start as early as possible. So I have two pictures on this slide. On the right is a young lady, I believe her name is Caitlin. She is on an Ambux arm trike. She is not able to use her legs very well. So she is able to propel some with her legs and get some steering with her arms. She's able to do this while on a ventilator, portable ventilator, and she has her parents walking behind her. Ambux is a company that is out there to help provide adaptive cycling opportunities for people. And I know here in Kentucky, there are several different chapters that you're able to engage with. Then on the right-hand side, there is a slide of a young kiddo. I can't exactly tell what his impairments are. Black pants on a black sled, but he is on an adapted hockey sled with looks like maybe a Paralympic hockey player. So you use a bucket seat with like an ice skate blade underneath, and you have two sawed off hockey sticks that have a claw on the bottom. So you propel yourself and then you hit the puck. It's a really cool thing to be able to see and be a part of. But we want to start early so that anyone with any involvements has the same benefits of exercise and activity as their age-matched peers. Independence, exercise wellness, mentoring, which is definitely what this kiddo on the right is getting. And then maybe anything else that you all see in these photos. If you want to put something in the chat that you see, if you want to put something in the chat that you've experienced, that would be great. That would enrich our conversation here. But I also want to point out that adaptations, we kind of have two different main camps within the intellectual disability and physical disability situations. Safety first, always. With our folks with intellectual disability, we have to make sure we are matching our instructions to their needs, that we make the environment safe, and that we have the right types of motivators. So we've seen all kinds of motivators. Jonathan talked about the parents saying, well, you just are going to go because the motivation is going to be a little bit delayed and it's hard for you. But Emma talked about motivators with her buddy system, that the buddy was able to help provide a little bit more motivation once they got to know their buddy, so that it was not, again, a babysitting situation, but an interactive one with a peer interaction that maybe is a little bit missing in that person's world. With physical adaptations, we have to, again, think about safety first. And really that typically involves some different equipment, avoiding secondary conditions. So if I'm thinking about somebody with a spinal cord injury, I have to make sure their skin is safe. We're probably doing weird transfers to get down to a different type of situation than they're used to sitting in. So we have to make sure the cushion's appropriate, that their feet are going to be safe. We have to make sure that they won't overheat. If we've got somebody who has Downs and a cardiac issue, that kind of involves a little bit of physical and intellectual, but we've got to make sure, are we avoiding any cardiac issues that might happen? And then the big thing with the physical adaptations is we have to make sure that there's parity. So we change some of the rules. If anyone here is a tennis player, adapted tennis, you're in a wheelchair, you get 2 bounces instead of 1 to get to the ball. Other than that, it's pretty much the same, right? If you're a wheelchair basketball player, you get 2 bounces to a push. So you can bounce the ball twice before you have to push. Otherwise, it would be called traveling, right? We don't call it walking. That's not appropriate. But so what you can see is that, again, you just have to take an activity and figure out what is the need that this person has. A couple of different examples. Here's someone out in a kayak. It's got outriggers to help stabilize the boat. There is a mechanism that helps hold the paddles on for that person. So all they have to do is concentrate on a little bit of balance and activating the paddling motion. Then I've got my friend Dave Hartsack here. He is in his racing wheelchair. And so This is a hand crank. This is like riding a bicycle. If he were in a different chair where his legs were tucked underneath him and he's pushing, that's racing like running. So there's two different types of wheelchair racing. But Dave has participated in the Bluegrass 10,000. I think it's like 40 years straight. And it's pretty amazing to see that because his spinal cord injury is almost older than I am. So he's really been able to help be an advocate for lots of folks and really push the envelope on what is available for adaptive sports in our area. And I think it's really important that we meet people where they are with rules that include, and I left that open, include them, include their family, include their friends and the people that they want to be able to participate with. So we've got on the left-hand side someone in a wheelchair playing tennis. So you can see that she's able to grasp the racket. She has one hand on her other wheel, potentially for balance. She has a little board in front of her knees to help make sure that she is able to stay where she needs to be. I think that she has at least one prosthetic on her left leg. It's hard to tell from this angle, but that is able to keep her balance and able to keep her moving so that if she were up and playing tennis and running around with the sweat, she might actually lose that prosthesis and not be safe to participate. So a wheelchair allows her to be able to participate. On the right-hand side, we have sit-down volleyball. So here our folks are able to participate. And this is from the Paralympics in 2016. They're able to participate in volleyball no matter what is happening with their bodies. And there's a variety of things that are going on with these folks. So the ability to participate really can make a huge difference. This slide, we got a couple of different photos here. And this is where I need to kind of circle back to being that 18-year-old who is trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. This on the left is my 18-year-old. He is a kiddo with autism and a couple of other different things going on. And he's participating in a ton of Special Olympics events. And this is Special Olympics affiliated. He is in a workout group that meets in Winchester on Wednesdays. And he's been doing this for probably 3 or 4 months. And to see a kid that I've tried to get to participate in wellness like this actually do that, something that could be for life and helps motivate him to get the abs that his brother has, who is more neurotypical in his development. It's been really important. So the supports are having a gym that accommodates him, having a group that accommodates him, having somebody who's there to help motivate him. And again, as an 18-year-old, he doesn't want to be listening to his mom or his dad. He wants to be hanging out with friends and he wants to be doing something cool with people that he respects outside of the home. So having this opportunity for support means the world to me as a mom. The other photo in here is it is Special Olympics golf, and that is a unified sport where you have an athlete and then someone from the community who helps. And my husband actually plays unified golf with our son. But there's bocce, there's all types of different things. There's actually going to be a bocce event here on campus later this spring that our son is going to be participating in with one of the UK college students. And if you don't think that he thinks that's the coolest thing since sliced bread, he totally does. So motivation to be active is huge. So the supports can be our communities, it can be the environment, it can be the accessibility to events. Transportation was a big thing that if we go back to Lindsay and Morgan's talk, and I know that sometimes because we're the transportation for other people who are participating in things that my son is participating in. At this point, I am going to put something in the chat. I've got 2 links that are in there. The first one is to an interactive map, and I'm going to come to the interactive map that Elise and her students pulled together of some of the resources that we have. All right. So I'm going to click on our Lexington area. And you can see some of the different opportunities that are available here. Right. Anything from top soccer, adapted soccer, therapeutic recreation within the Fayette County Urban County Government Parks and Rec. That was too many letters to put on here. Miracle League Baseball, Acing Autism for tennis, some special strong adapted lifting opportunities, Allegro dance, Central Kentucky Riding for the Hope, and then senior fitness classes. And there are more specific things that I know are out there, but I think this is our opportunity to start a list and continue to grow that. So so if we were to actually click on Nicholasville, we're going to see some of the martial arts that Jonathan was talking about earlier. So it's an interactive map that we really hope to be able to add to. And I think I'm going to reshare just in case. Sometimes the screen gets cranky on me. So here is a lot of the same information plus more listed out. So in Lexington, we have opportunities with links that you could access to learn more. Got Lexington, Louisville. I do want to highlight the Jefferson County Schools Adapted Sports Program. It was born out of grants from the COVID era, and they have an amazing opportunity for students in Jefferson County and even from surrounding counties who don't have the same resources available in their homeschool communities to come and join them for adapted sports. They started with track and field and have expanded into so many sports I can't even keep track of them right now. So it's a really great opportunity. If you're in a space and you're looking for how could we do this, they're a great resource. But moving a little further west in Bowling Green, we've got some inclusive sports and Move United, Adaptive Rec in their Parks and Rec, Camp Courageous Kids, which is actually the space that Camp Kysack had moved to over time. It's a great place for young adults to get an idea of discerning vocations. This is something I would like to do. And then a lot of different resources for a lot of different populations to enjoy a week of camp, maybe free of some of the stresses of other parts of life. And maybe it's the first time they could feel included. But again, going all across the state, there are different opportunities, including a lot of rock steady boxing for people with Parkinson's, some adapted Little League. I'm interested to know so much more. I also want to highlight, though, in Cincinnati, Bridge Adaptive is a really great opportunity where a couple of PTs said, you know what, we need more adaptive opportunities here. And they just went out and started this opportunity. There's a lot of try it events that are available. So there's some statewide resources, some for funding. And then there's some videos on a couple of different opportunities that you could maybe start in your areas. So this is a group effort to pull all of this together. And I think it's a jumping off point for us in the Commonwealth. I know HDI has always been a champion of opportunities and trying to help disseminate information. So now you guys are part of the committee too. All right. I really just have a tiny bit more on our presentation to help wrap things up. Just a second here to share again. All righty. So we've shared with you that information, and I just want to say thank you to HDI for this opportunity. And I want to say thank you to you all for being here. I think representation is really important. So I don't know if you guys have seen the wheelchairs that are out there in the Hot Wheels line. When my kid saw this in Kroger, he was like, "Mom, you need this wheelchair." And I have these here in my office for students to play with. But there's a fella who does a lot of like extreme sports from his wheelchair, and he has his own line of Hot Wheels, which is pretty cool. And this is from the movie Champions with Woody Harrelson. I want to say my parting words would be to enjoy the 2026 Winter Paralympics. And if you have not seen this Visa commercial, this is a very sketchy, glitchy picture here, but this is Oksana Masters. She is an Olympian who participates in winter and summer games, and she has an untold number of medals to her name. So this is a Kentuckian right here represented in a commercial for the Winter Olympic events. So I have somehow there was a slide that may have gotten left out there with all my information, but I've put my information in the chat. We're glad to open things up to questions, but really this is also the time for you guys to wrap everything together, and I'm sure Walt's gonna send it home here.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Dr. Lee. We have a couple comments in the chat.
Yeah.
just getting to those. I'm seeing the
But-
LEF climbing wall is going to be adding adaptive climbing. They're also going to
Mhm.
have a Parkinson's opportunity soon with that. And Catalyst comes through. Great. All right, Lindsay's got some more resources there. All right.
We have Jacob
Yeah,
commented,
thanks, Kara. I
love.
just wanted to give a plug really quickly.
Go
I
ahead.
think I'm on delay.
Go ahead, Lindsay. Oops. Oh, Jacob had a comment in the
Sorry, I think
chat.
our
Oh,
internet's
Lindsay,
struggling. I just
Lindsay, you may
yeah.
have just cut out for just a minute there.
Can you guys hear me okay?
But we can hear you now. You cut out for about 5 or 6 seconds.
Oh, good. Thank you. Sorry about that. Like I mentioned, we're in a rural part of the mountains. I just wanted to make sure to mention that HDI does have a recreation resource manual that I didn't see listed on the statewide resources that were that Kara shared. So I put that link in the chat. But that's included there, as well as some of our local community grant funding efforts that have been supported through HDI over the years. Morgan and I run a website, the wellness number 4KY .org has a lot of adapted exercise videos that Kentuckians with disabilities have helped create, as well as universally designed health education resources. So definitely check those out. And then we mentioned bingo size. It's what's on our shirts today. It's what we're traveling doing around the state, but it's exactly what it sounds like. And we're totally frozen. So I don't know if you can hear anything, but it's bingo, it's exercise, and it's
We can
accessible.
hear you.
So wanted y'all to check that out as well.
Thank you. We have a comment in the chat from Jacob. Loved that camp. Wish they were opened longer.
Absolutely.
We have a comment from John Drummond. I think that's the golden rule. Always meet the person, client you're coaching or training where they are. Lindsay Mullis commented, Morgan participates in that exercise program too.
Morgan, your shoes were in that photo, but I cropped the rest out because I didn't get your approval.
Oh, I did not.
We have a comment in the chat from Davita Gatewood. My son really likes his adaptive bike. It's been so good for him and makes a big impact for him. I have been looking for physical activities for my son with cerebral palsy and other diagnoses. It's been an interesting journey. We just joined Special Olympics teams. I have found some really good options.
I'm so glad of that, Davita. And if you actually want to send me a message about where you are, I could maybe help brainstorm a couple of things. August, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you knew maybe about any programs in New York. I'm specifically in like the Long Island region of New York. Um, or if maybe you know any databases that can help find places. I'd appreciate that.
August, I actually know nothing about what's available in New York, except that there will probably be more options because the population
Yeah,
is
density.
more
Yeah.
dense.
Yeah.
So Special Olympics is a great place to start.
Oh, okay.
I would start there, and they can help guide you to things that might be you might enjoy, might be appropriate for, and then they could also help guide you to other things that are in your area. I am so glad you're such an advocate for yourself. Keep reaching out, keep finding things, and if nothing else, you could always email me later and we could try to work together, because I know
that's
people at
great.
universities up there, and they would probably be willing to do kind of the same thing that I'm doing, you know.
Yeah. All right.
Connecting
Well,
people with resources.
okay. Thank you. I appreciate it so much and great presentation.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. As advertised, this has been great. It's been an honor and privilege for all of you to join us today. I want to thank our presenters for taking time out of their day to share their experiences with us. We are so grateful for the variety of perspectives which brought richness to the conversation. Thank you for an incredibly informative conversation. Be well. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Walt.